Almost 2 years ago, Brevard County voters passed a half-cent sales tax to pay for Indian River Lagoon restoration. Since then, the county has removed muck from the estuary and is working on removing septic tanks from critical areas. But cleaning up the lagoon completely will take decades. Welcome to Eye on Brevard. I'm Rob Landers. This week, my colleague, Florida Today engagement editor Isadora Rangel, interviewed Virginia Barker, the Brevard County Director of Natural Resources Management Department. Her message is clear. It took decades for pollution in the lagoon to reach the levels we see today, and there's no overnight fix for it. Barker explained what has caused the problem and why passing the sales tax was such an achievement. Watch.
Virginia, thank you for being on the show.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So let's start with what you do at the county. You're Brevard County's Natural Resources Management Director. What is your role exactly with the county?
So as Director of the Natural Resources Office, I oversee a number of programs. We have all of the environmental permitting in unincorporated Brevard. We have underground storage tank compliance and hazardous waste cleanup, so the old gas stations that had spills. We have a contract with the state to do the cleanup in Brevard, Indian River, and do inspections in Okeechobee, Martin, and St. Lucie counties. So we have all the counties along the Indian River Lagoon except Volusia.
Wow.
We also have the county stormwater program, so both stormwater quality and flood control, and beaches and boating and waterways, and then as a result of the citizens passing the new sales tax for the lagoon, we have the lagoon program.
Which I imagine takes up a lot of your time.
Yes, that is suddenly the majority of my time.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the sales tax. It passed in 2016 with a very broad majority of votes. What is the history behind this tax? And I like to remind Brevard that we're the only county who has passed this sales tax along the lagoon. And it's such a, I think it's such a landmark for us. How did we get here to passing the sales tax?
So the lagoon has been in decline for a number of years, and we saw that notably in the 2011 super bloom that then expanded from Volusia County all the way down beyond Sebastian Inlet. And that was followed by bloom after bloom after bloom. In 2013, the blooms became toxic to wildlife in the lagoon. We had dead manatees, dead dolphins, hundreds of dead pelicans, and so that really got the community concerned about the health of the water that runs right through the spine of our community. And then in 2016, those blooms continued and resulted in the largest fish kill we have ever documented here. And so it was on the heels of that fish kill that the people said, no more, this has to be fixed. How are we going to do it? The county commission asked the governor for help. He sent his directors of multiple departments down here to meet with us, and they said, well, you need a plan. You need a plan for how you're going to fix the problem, and then we can try to help you fund the cost of implementing that plan. So in the summer of 2016, we looked at the sources of pollution to the lagoon and what could be done to reduce those and remove those, and adopted a plan in August for the public to be able to see before the November election, and they voted on the half-cent sales tax to implement that $300 million plan.
And what are the main sources of pollution in the lagoon?
One of the biggest sources is that we have been putting pollution in the lagoon for 5 or 6 decades now. Wow. And it has been accumulating because of the shape of the lagoon being long and narrow with 90 miles between Sebastian Inlet and the inlet up in Volusia County. The pollution that we put in Brevard County's portion of the lagoon has nowhere to go. It's here to stay.
Unlike the southern part.
Unlike the southern part, yeah, where they're
flushing
inlets and flushing and circulation, we don't have that. That's not the ecosystem that we have here. And so that pollution has accumulated, and it's built up in muck deposits that are smothering about 10% of the bottom. And as that muck decomposes, it releases nutrients that feed algae bloom after algae bloom after algae bloom. So that muck decomposition accounts for almost half of the nutrient loading in the lagoon. And then a whole suite of other upland sources account for the rest.
What are the other sources that we're talking about?
So one of the biggest upland sources is septic drain fields. And so we've been looking at, which septic systems are the biggest problems for the lagoon. We have about over 80,000 septic systems in Brevard. 60,000 of those drain towards the Indian River Lagoon. The other 20,000 drain towards the St. Johns River. And depending on distance and soils and lots of other factors, different septic systems have a different impact on the lagoon. Stormwater is another big source, and stormwater comes from everything that we're doing at home and in our businesses and on the streets. All that rain that falls on hardened surfaces and picks up pollution and then runs off into ditches and tributaries and creeks that makes it to the lagoon.
So it's obvious we're all contributing to the issue. And back to septic tanks for a little bit. So many people are on septic tanks. Is the issue that, is it malfunctioning septic tanks, or just septic tanks, period, are bad for the lagoon?
Most people have a conventional septic system. There are all kinds of different septic systems, just like there are all kinds of different cars. But your basic septic system does very little. It controls bugs. It controls things that would make us ill. It was not designed to prevent nutrients from getting into the groundwater and getting into the lagoon. There are more advanced septic systems that are designed to do that, but they're not required and they're not used very often here.
And we currently have a 5-month moratorium on new septic tanks, or conventional septic tanks.
On conventional septic tanks. So in certain areas closest to the lagoon or its tributaries within 50 meters, we have a ban on a moratorium on the conventional systems. You can still build a house, you can still put in a septic system, but it has to be an advanced system that reduces nutrients.
And of those 80,000 septic tanks, how many do you think need to be replaced? What are the emergency areas here in the county?
We mapped the location of the septic systems, and over 15,000 of them are within about 150 feet of either the lagoon or a tributary that runs to the lagoon or a canal that drains directly to the lagoon. And so those are contributing about 27 pounds of nitrogen pollution apiece per year.
Wow.
That adds up to a very big number.
Wow. And so then it comes the cost issue, because homeowners, if they have to foot the entire bill, that could run into thousands of dollars.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in the past, government has stepped in to help. Is any of that sales tax money being used for that? And let's talk a little bit also, how is the sales tax money being used currently?
So the plan that's available is posted online. We update it annually as we learn more. That lists all of the projects and where every dollar is going. So yes, about $60 million is going to wastewater treatment of some sort, either upgrades of existing wastewater treatment plants or replacement or upgrade of septic systems. So about $40 million is going towards upgrading septic systems. So of those 15,000 systems that are closest to open waters connected to the lagoon, we identified sort of the worst 4,000. And we plan to reach out to the owners of those systems and provide them grants to upgrade their systems.
So the homeowners still pay a share of the cost then?
We intended to cover all of the costs. The industry is changing, and costs are changing rapidly. So we'll see how that goes, but our intent is to be able to cover the entire cost.
And has there been pushback from homeowners who perhaps bought a home that already had a septic tank, and why am I now responsible for footing the bill? Do you get a lot of that from homeowners?
We haven't had that yet, but we haven't really gotten into it with the homeowners yet. We're busy trying to figure out the permitting with the Department of Health, which is actually quite tricky. And so until we get all our ducks in a row, we haven't contacted those homeowners. I think rarely do people want to do harm. And once they find out that they are part of the problem and that there's a way for them to be part of the solution, people will want to participate, and especially if we can cover the cost for them.
And especially we voted for the sales tax, so it makes sense. It seems Brevard is very conscious about the lagoon. Well, good news is you got more money from the sales tax than projected. How much money do you currently have, and how much did you forecast before?
So as of now, our balance is $56 million. We anticipated about $34 million a year coming in. Right now, we're getting about $45 million a year coming in. So the growth in our economy and the growth in tourism has led to much higher revenues than anticipated, and that allows us to do more and have a better chance of providing full cost.
Which is awesome. And we talked about the sewage and septic tank projects. The rest of the money, give me a few examples of the projects that are being funded, because most people don't understand how they work, and like give us concrete examples of how that money is being spent.
So about 2/3 of the total plan dollars is going towards muck removal. So those 50 to 60 years of accumulated nutrients that are smothering the bottom of the lagoon. The way to get those out is to physically remove them, to
physically dredge them
out. And so we have a Turkey Creek project that has already been completed. We have a MIMS project that is currently underway. We're partnering with the city of Cocoa Beach. They're in phase 3 of their project. We have 2 projects that are in the bidding phase, one in Merritt Island up Sykes Creek, and one in the Grand Canal just north of Satellite Beach in the unincorporated area south of Pineda Causeway. We have several more projects in the pipeline. We're partnered with the Water Management District on a dredging project in O'Galley River right now. And so we're working with researchers at Florida Tech to map where the worst muck deposits are in the lagoon and prioritize those. And we're working with the permitting agencies, federal and state permitting agencies, to try to streamline their permitting for these projects, because it takes 2 to 3 years apiece to permit an individual project. And we know we have 15 to 20 projects anticipated over the 10-year life of the tax. And so we would like to permit those in a couple clumps instead of one at a time.
And how much muck are we talking about? Is there a way to measure how many tons or
5 to 7 million cubic yards.
Okay.
And a lot of people ask, well, what is a cubic yard? So if you imagine that box that your new washer or dryer or dishwasher came in, that's about the size of this table, actually. 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet as a cubic yard. And there's 5 to 7 million of those in the lagoon. So it's a lot of material.
How long is it going to take to dredge all of that? And then in the meantime, I imagine you got to stop new muck from getting into the lagoon, right?
Yes. So we have to do 2 things. We have to remove the muck that's already there, and we have to reduce the sources of nutrients that are continuing to contribute new muck, and sediment and erosion control that contributes to new muck.
Wow, seems like a lot of work being done. After Hurricane Irma last year, there was a huge dump of sewage into the lagoon. Some politicians as well as residents asked that the sales tax money be used to fix pipes and existing sewage infrastructure. What are your thoughts about that? There's been a lot of debate whether that's the purpose of the sales tax. What are your views on that topic?
So we can help in some ways. The way that utilities are set up, they're sort of like a separate business unit. The rate that sewer customers pay is supposed to be set at an amount that covers the cost of providing that service. It's a user pay system. What happened was, as the economy declined, the rates were held constant and didn't keep up with the costs. And so the system maintenance fell behind schedule, and now we're seeing the effects of that. And so we need to catch up. The county, as well as some of the cities, need to catch up on deferred maintenance, and they need to look at the rate structures and make sure that rates are set at the amount that it takes to maintain that service. Where the half-cent sales tax can help is that we've also identified that there are, where people's individual homes connect to the public utility, they own that piping that's in their yard, that's between their house and the road right-of-way. And there are leaks in those private pipes as well. And so we're setting up a grant program to help those people replace their private connections.
And one of the things we were talking before we started recording is people's expectations about the sales tax. We passed it less than 2 years ago, and we haven't had the massive fish kills that we had in 2016, but we've seen some things going on, and people are, so what's the point of having a sales tax? And what do you tell people? I mean, how many years are we talking about? And do you have examples like we look at Tampa Bay, Chesapeake Bay, which were very successful stories? I mean, how do you tell people?
Right.
And how long it's
Tampa
gonna
Bay
take?
and Chesapeake Bay are very successful stories, and they've taken 25 to 35 years to see a turnaround. Now, obviously, we would like to accelerate that schedule tremendously and not wait that many decades to see improvement. But it is going to take years to do enough cleanup of the muck that's there and enough reduction of the incoming load to turn this thing around. And the first thing that we will hope to see is clearer water, better water quality. And we have to have that for years in order for the seagrass to reestablish. And then once that seagrass reestablishes, that's sort of the rainforest of the lagoon. That's the habitat that is needed for the fish and the crabs and all the other wildlife, the marine life that we appreciate. And so there's sort of, you know, maybe 5 years or so we'll see improved water quality. 7 or 8 years we might begin to see significant seagrass recovery, and then several years after that we could hope to see the marine life abundance recovering.
So we're looking at possibly decades,
yes,
just like the other two cases.
Yes.
And what is the status of the lagoon today? What is your diagnosis of the lagoon right now?
It is a lot like it was this time in 2016. We narrowly escaped fish kill in March. The conditions were extremely similar to 2016. In some cases, the conditions were worse. And we watched the dissolved oxygen levels crash in some of the same areas where they crashed in 2016. But the fish survived this time. We don't know what could happen with the blooms this summer as the water heats up and the nutrients are still there. There's every potential for low dissolved oxygen and fish kills. So we just have to brace ourselves and do everything we can as fast as we can and look forward to a better future. But it may take us quite a while to get there.
And have we seen any tangible results from the projects that are already taking place?
We have. So in the Turkey Creek was the first dredging project that we completed, and the flux of nutrients from that area before dredging versus after dredging are half. They're cut in half. The concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus pollution in the groundwater underneath the first septic to sewer program in Rockledge, they reduced down to non-detectable in the lab results. And so we are seeing those results, but they're in very specific project areas, and so you have to do a whole lot of project areas to get them to add up to a system. You know, this lagoon's 156 miles long, 72 miles of that is in Brevard, so it takes a lot of projects to clean up that much water.
And would it help if other counties like Volusia, Indian River, St. Lucie, and Martin passed a similar sales tax? Would it help us up here? And is that something, did you ever talk to other counties to see if they're interested?
We have talked to other counties. There's the 5-county coalition where they talk about that quite a bit. The other counties are very interested. I get calls all the time. How did we do our plan? What can they learn from us? And so they are looking to do similar things. The way that the circulation in the lagoon occurs and the positioning of those inlets means that the pollution that's in Brevard came from people in Brevard. We can't blame it on Volusia. We can't blame it on Indian River. We can't blame it on Lake Okeechobee or the Army Corps of Engineers. The water that's here came from the land that we live on. And so while we can't blame others, it also means that we can clean it up and we don't depend on others to clean it up. So it's an opportunity for us.
And let's talk about the way Brevard and just Florida overall has developed over the decades. That has led us to this issue. I mean, what do you see that if we could go back 50 years from today, what would you have done differently in terms of development here?
Well, back in the 80s, we realized that stormwater was delivering a lot of nutrients and sediment to water bodies. And the county adopted stormwater regulations about 5 years before the state did. And so, and those regulations have been refined over the years. We're doing a much better job now with new development. But we have loads of old development that has no storage on site. And so the water that hits their rooftops and their driveways just runs right off with whatever nutrients are in the path. So we have, one thing we haven't talked about is the amount of pollution that falls out of the sky. We humans have polluted our air and our water. And so about a third of the pollution in the lagoon is falling out of the sky. And so the rain that comes down is already polluted, and then it hits rooftops and leaves, and that's already polluted. And any fertilizer that we've put down that hasn't soaked into the plants yet, that gets washed off. And so that stormwater is a problem. If we had it to do all over again, we would have a lot more storage and swales and wetlands kept on sites to provide treatment to keep that water out of the lagoon or clean it before it gets to the lagoon.
And us living so close to the water, everybody wants a waterfront property. Is that in itself an issue? I imagine if not this in a sustainable manner, it is, right?
To some degree, yes. So it's really important for waterfront property owners to have some buffer, even a 10 or 15 foot wide strip where they don't fertilize, where they pay very close attention to what they're doing and don't put down pollution. Soil has a lot of properties in it that help reduce pollution. And so the further back you are, the more soil water has to travel through, and the more treatment occurs naturally.
Wow, that's very interesting. And the expectation when Brevard passed the sales tax was that there would be matching dollars from the state and federal government. That hasn't really happened since.
No.
I mean, can you come up with an explanation for why that hasn't happened, and how does that impact the implementation of these projects when you had that expectation in the first place?
Right. You know, funding from the state is highly variable depending on the legislature, and so, you know, things have just changed in Tallahassee, and the interest has not been there for the Indian River Lagoon. There's been a lot of focus on the Everglades, a lot of focus on the spring sheds. Fortunately, the problems experienced in the spring sheds are very similar to the problems that we have here, especially with septic systems and the nutrients that are in reclaimed water used for irrigation. And so they're learning those lessons in the spring sheds. They're coming up with solutions there that hopefully we will be able to adopt here. So even though the funding hasn't been coming our way, the funding has been going to other places trying to come up with solutions that will be useful here.
And there is a bill that has been introduced, I think twice, that would allocate $50 million annually.
Yes.
Would that bill help us? It hasn't really gone anywhere, but
yeah,
there's
if
always
that
hope.
passed, it would absolutely help us. The state's draft budget contained $20 million for the Indian River Lagoon, Caloosahatchee systems. and that didn't make it through. So there have been many attempts to come up with those matching dollars. They just haven't made it through the full legislative process.
You know, I'll tell you, I covered the legislature in Tallahassee, and when people think the Indian River Lagoon, they always think Lake Okeechobee discharges. And I think I'm pretty sure that the fact that they sort of addressed that issue down south, they think, oh, the Indian River Lagoon is fine now. They don't realize.
Or that all the allocation that might have gone to the Indian River Lagoon went to that, and there wasn't any left over for the northern end.
Yeah, and it's an issue. We are a big state. People don't understand the geography of the state because they live so far away.
Right.
I think a lot of times that plays a big role.
We were also really fortunate in the 3 years leading up to the half-cent sales tax that over $60 million was funded by the legislature for projects in the lagoon. And so some of that was maybe a backlash that we'd already gotten ours.
Got too much.
And they needed to take care of some other areas of the state. So hopefully as time goes on, we can get back into those funding.
Or if we get another Senate president, which we did with Mike Harridopoulos or Steve Crisafulli, who was Speaker, I think those things always help. We have a minute and 15 left, but I want to ask you kind of an off-the-wall question, which is, people say, why can't we just dredge another inlet, like to address the flushing issue? Your thoughts on that?
There are so many complicating factors to that, one of which is that inlets mess with coastal factors, and we have a tremendous erosion problem on our beaches. What we saw down at the south end in St. Lucie and Martin counties with the blue-green toxic bloom they had last year was that went out the inlet, and they had to close their beaches because they were unsafe to swim. So we have to look at all the environmental implications of an inlet, and it would not be quick, and it would be extremely expensive. And so that's not off the table, but it's not going to be the quick fix that people want it to be.
It's not an easy issue to resolve.
There's no silver bullet.
There isn't. Virginia, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Well, that's it for our show today. Our thanks to Virginia for joining us. If you have questions about today's show, feel free to email Isadora at irangel@floridatoday.com. You can catch us again next week on WEFS, and you can rewatch this episode on Florida Today's YouTube channel. Thank you for watching, everyone.